Hello Sloohers, and welcome to Slooh's Practical Astronomy series with me, Paul Cox, where we're going to learn to explore space together and all get the most out of our Slooh memberships. Now, if you're somewhere on the Slooh website and you're suddenly hearing my dulcet or not so dulcet tones over the airways, hop over to the Situation Room. So you can do that by clicking on the live cast menu in the side and hopping up to Space Situation Room to watch the live cast with me now. Or you can turn my audio off if you're feeling a little bit antisocial, and you can just do that with this little bug up here. You can just switch me on or off and change the volume up there as well. Anyway, I hope you're going to stick around and enjoy the rest of this hour that we're going to spend together tonight. Got some good stuff tonight. You do not want to miss it. And as well as me, before we get into our topics today, don't forget that Helen Avery is going to be live in an hour and a half. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern with her latest installment of her constellation stories. And this week I'm particularly looking forward to this because Helen is taking us on a journey back in time, more than 5,000 years, to when the great sphinxes were being built in Egypt. And she's going to be telling us how they're connected to the zodiacal constellation of Leo, which is perfectly placed to view, and also why the lion was so important to the ancient Egyptians. And this week we added a couple of new objects to the Slooh 500. If you've been keeping an eye open in the discussion boards, you will have seen those, and they're galaxy clusters, and I know that Helen's going to be watching those live tonight. Now, do excuse me because the start of this little live cast just happens at the moment to coincide with when the Chile Observatory comes online, and I need to hop off to see whether or not the Chile telescopes come online properly. And you can join me actually, so let's hop over to the telescope navigation in the sidebar, and there we can see it. Chile 1 is green, so that means it's online. Let's take a look, make sure imaging is starting up. Ooh, that's pretty. Ooh, that's a nice one. Charles B.A. I'm reading this, by the way. If you're new to Slooh, this is the live telescope page, and this is the live stream coming in from the Chile 1 Wide Field Telescope. And over on the, oh, look at that, it's just turning into colour. This is a nice one. All of the, if you don't know what the object is, it kind of tells you in the little kind of head-up display over the top of it, but also over here in the right-hand side, there's all the information you want about the current live mission. And there we can see it's been scheduled by Charles B.A., who joined Slooh in 2016. He's an astronomer member, and he's looking at the Toby Jug Nebula. I know I've seen this one before, but I haven't seen this for quite a while actually. Now, actually, I'm going to snap a shot at this because it's because I haven't seen it for such a long time. And to do that, all I'm going to do is hit this little camera button down here, and bang! That's popped a snap straight into my pictures. So you can see there the camera hasn't quite cooled down there. We've got a little bit of gradient. We're going to talk about the equipment a little bit later, but let's have a quick look, see how this looks in the Chile Ultra Wide Telescope. Oh, that's very noisy, isn't it? That's not very good. So that looks like we might have some cloud tonight. Cloud is in the forecast. Unfortunately, hopping down here, the university have not restarted their all sky camera, so this is still stuck on one from over a week ago. They have promised us that they're going to get that back online, so we can't actually check sky conditions. But anyway, listen, that is, keep your eyes on those live views. So anyway, what are we up to over this next hour? Well, first off, we're going to take a look at the current conditions at the observatories. We're then going to look at one of my favorite astronomical discoveries as we celebrate today the 88th anniversary of a guy called Clyde Tombaugh, who's actually an amateur astronomer, but Clyde Tombaugh's discovery of Pluto. And we're going to actually we're going to start an exercise to replicate his discovery in the Slooh telescopes. Now, any of you can do this, and I'm going to show you how, and it's going to be a lot easier than you think. And tonight we're going to talk about the actual discovery itself, but then we're going to talk about how to set up your Pluto missions, because it's not straightforward at the moment, and I'll tell you why a little bit later. But we'll just see how to reserve a mission, your own mission to Pluto. Something, as I say, it's a little bit more difficult at the moment because it's nearing the end of its apparition. That's its viewing season. But then we're going to replicate Clyde Tombaugh's technique to identify any moving objects in the images that we collect this week. And then next week, we're going to create a little time-lapse animation of your images that you capture. I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. Got some great free software as well for you. But tonight we're going to look at the first part of that. So that's certainly practical astronomy if ever I heard it. But then we're also going to look at the Slooh 2018 Members Messier Marathon and how all members can get involved. Doesn't matter whether you're an astronomer member, an apprentice member, or even Slooh crew. Get involved with this Messier Marathon. It's great fun, and it's really great fun because you know that on the night you're collaborating with members from around the globe as we build up our own stunning, and I mean stunning, collection of images of all 110 Messier objects in a single night. So I'm going to tell you all about that a little bit later as well. And actually we're going to deal with that over the coming weeks, get into more and more information. But you need to put into your diaries Saturday the 17th of March, because that's when it's actually going to happen. And if we've got poor weather on the 17th, then we're going to move it to the following night as well. Hey, listen, I've just noticed on my on the home page, look here, my rank's gone up by 2 this week. Cool. My rank is it's a measure of my gravity points that I've got, and gravity points on Slooh are really a measure of your activity in the community. So it can be as easy as liking something, like liking that Mars photo, to replying to a comment, attending a mission. Watching this show actually gives you some gravity points. But there you go. Look at that. There are 39 Slooh members who over the last year have been more active than me. Wow, what are you guys doing? Do you ever sleep? Hey, listen, while we're just looking at that, before I tell you what else we've got in the hour, you know me. I'm like a kid. I kind of get distracted. And I saw a message the other day, somebody talking about the Mars images that we're seeing at the moment, and that we're not really seeing a great deal of detail on it. Now, this is going to change. The problem with Mars at the moment is it's still quite a long way away from Earth. So its apparent size is really quite small, which actually means that we won't start to see some of the incredible detail that we can see on Mars, and we can see a lot of the darker features. And oh, actually, talking of this is quite relevant actually, because talking about Clyde Tombaugh discovered Pluto at the Lowell Observatory, and it was Percival Lowell, if you remember, the rich kid who kind of built the Lowell Observatory. He was the guy who wrote about the canals or canales on Mars. But anyway, look, Zenith captured this this particular image of Mars with the Slooh Chile telescope last night, I think it was. So we're not going to see some great details probably for another few weeks yet. But as Mars continues to grow in the sky, we are going to start seeing some absolutely glorious images coming through from Mars, from the Chile 1 wide field telescope. That's a great one for Mars, and also the new Canary 4 telescope. Anyway, sorry, I digressed a bit, as you know. I'm rather partial to doing, but we are also going to take a look tonight at Slooh's observatories and telescopes, including choosing the best telescope for the different object types, and a question in the discussion boards about actually the different processing options and how they affect images and data that you receive. So we're going to look at that more tonight than the actual telescopes, because I really want to talk about the individual telescopes when all of them are online, so that we can actually compare the same objects in the telescopes as we're watching live during the show. And of course, finally, tonight we're going to be taking a look at any questions that you've posted to the discussion board. So hop over, you go to community in the left hand panel, you can go up to featured threads, or you can go to most recent, one of the two, but recent threads, and you can hop into here. So let's take a look. You can see we've got an entry here, post here for my show, this one, and for Helen Avery's show later on, where you can ask questions. So we'll check this at the end of the show, and we'll just pick up any other questions that you've got. And don't forget, not too late to post some questions here for Helen. Everybody's been sharing images with Helen, which has been pretty good, of some of her targets tonight, just in case we're weathered out. But you know, let's keep an eye on that Chile telescope as well. It's looking like we're probably going to be okay. Mission transition going on here. There we go. Oh, that's a nice one. What's that? Merging galaxies. What's that? 2 or 3 galaxies, do you think? It looks like at least 3, doesn't it? We can zoom in a bit on that using the little feature on the left. We can drag it up as well. Well, it certainly looks like 3 galactic cores. So the really bright objects here, those are stars, but the 3 kind of fuzzy objects in the middle, these merging galaxies. You know, this is a new one for me. So Gregory F, member since 2013. Thank you very much for sharing that object with us. Actually, I'm going to snap a pic of that one. Thank you very much. Straight into my pics. Anyway, let's get back to this evening. Right, I did want to take a little look at the observatory conditions. Now, the best way of doing this is actually hopping over to community again and going up to featured threads, because I gave a little bit of an update on, when was it? Friday. Here we go. That's right, I have about 4 hats on at the Slooh. I am one of the Slooh techs. I'm actually one of the Slooh ops as well. And anyway, look, we had one of the, as you know, the Slooh's Canary Islands observatories at the Institute of Astrophysics of the Canary Islands. It's actually at the Observatory del Teide. That's the whole facility. And it's home to some of the best telescopes in the world, including, of course, the ones that you guys use every single night. But we had one of the EAC technicians go up there on Friday to try and look if he could clear some of this ice. And he sent us some pictures. So this actually is of the all-sky camera, and he has confirmed that actually the only thing that's wrong with the all-sky camera is that you can see here some of the cables were just literally ripped out by the weight of ice that had accumulated, even though it's in a protective kind of sheath. But you can see here this is a build-up of ice behind Dome 2. And you can see all this stuff down here, although it looks like snow. That is solid and compacted rime ice. It's about 4 or 5 feet deep on the north of Dome 2. Dome 1 is slightly better. Now, Dome 1 is the one that you can see up here at the top of this image. And in fact, we're going to run some tests later during Helen's show, because I ran some tests while it was daylight earlier on today, and I can safely open that dome. It's not wholly safely to open without monitoring it tonight, but we're going to open it up partially, and we're going to use it for Helen's show. So that should be quite good. Just a little bit of a test of the telescopes, because they haven't been running for quite a long time. But anyway, the EAC guys said they're going to go up on Monday. Now, the dome that you can see there, that is Dome 3, and you can see on Friday, and in fact, even today, this rime ice is still actually attached to the dome shutters. Now, these domes are made of fiberglass. It doesn't help really that they're white, so they don't really absorb much of the sun's heat. But the problem is, if we get the EAC guys to smash this ice off, this is rime ice, it's incredibly dense, it's almost as hard as rock. To actually smash it off is going to transfer a tremendous force straight into those glass fiber domes and has the potential of actually cracking the dome. So that's got to be done quite carefully. So at the moment, what we're looking at is it's probably going to be Canary 1 will come back online first, followed by maybe Canary 3, but it might take longer. They might have to wait for some of that consolidated ice around Canary 2 to clear a little bit. And he's certainly, as he found out to his cost on Friday, not going to get anywhere with a shovel. They're actually starting to use pneumatic concrete picks, would you believe, to clear some of the ice up at the observatory there. So there you go. Keep an eye open. Oh, that's one of the observatories, which is right on top of the ridge. So we're actually in quite a sheltered position, which is one of the reasons why Slooh's domes operate longer than the ones right up on the ridge, because this is going to take an age to get off. This is the Song telescope right up the top on the ridge, and I'd be very, very surprised if that level of rime ice has formed without actually damaging the structure of their dome. So anyway, for next week, keep an eye open in the discussion boards, because we'll put a few updates in there. So anyway, right, that's the current conditions. So let's have a look at one of my favorite astronomical discoveries, and actually one of my favorite activities that you can do with the Slooh telescopes. And it's an activity that takes in many aspects of using Slooh, from setting up and acquiring your data through to processing your images, and using one of the most widely used techniques actually in astronomy to make discoveries. But before we step through the steps necessary to replicate the discovery of Pluto, let's remind ourselves of how that discovery story unfolded. Now, I've got some nice cool images to show you here. So while I'm telling you about this, you can take a look at these as well. Actually, we'll flip through these. So anyway, only 3 years after building his first telescope in 1926, and he was only aged 20, a farm boy named Clyde Tombaugh sent his drawings of Jupiter and Mars that he'd made through his telescope that he'd made to the Lowell Observatory. Now, the Lowell Observatory is in Flagstaff, Arizona, and I've had the pleasure of visiting that. And if you are ever in that part of the world, make sure you go along. They're really friendly and open to visitors and stuff like that. The Discovery Telescope, by the way, is based there. But not that far up the road, certainly not from the point of view of the USA, is Meteor Crater, the Barringer Crater. And you know that here at Slooh we talk about the threat from nearest asteroids quite a lot. Well, if you ever wanted to see direct proof that large chunks of primordial space rock impact Earth, hop along to Meteor Crater in Arizona, and you can see the evidence for yourself, because it's carved out, let's say, quite a large chunk of Arizona, which is now a deep hole. Anyway, so great visiting there. And they've actually got this in the entrance foyer, this massive, must weigh a couple of tons or something like this, huge chunk of iron from that meteorite. But anyway, listen, we were talking about this farm boy called Clyde Tombaugh, who made his first telescope in 1926, sent these drawings off of Jupiter and Mars, the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff. And the Lowell Observatory was really famous for its work on Mars. Its creator, its founder, Percival Lowell, he was the guy who used their massive telescope. I mean, it was, you know, one of, if not the best telescope at the time when it was first installed, and he used that to make his observations of Mars. And you may remember that Percival Lowell was the guy who drew out all of these wonderful sketches of Mars and what he believed to be canals on the face of Mars. Turned out he wasn't quite right, but anyway. Farm boy. He sends off his drawings off to the Lowell Observatory, and all he's really expecting is to receive a kind of helpful critique of his work. And so he was quite surprised when, very soon after sending his drawings in, they actually offered him, a farm boy, a job at the observatory. How cool is that? Falling on your feet or what? Anyway, Clyde Tombaugh, this guy, he worked at the Lowell Observatory from 1929 to 1945. Now, his start date, or his start year of 1929, is quite important in the story here. And although he worked there for so many years, it's the discovery that he made during that first year there that has really written his name into the history books. Now, he'd been charged by the observatory director. I think it was Mr. Slooh. What a great name, Mr. Slooh. I don't know if he was a professor, actually. Maybe someone can comment in the discussion boards if he was Professor Slooh. Still sounds a cool name. Anyway, he was the director, and he charged Clyde Tombaugh with the search for the mysterious Planet X. No, not Nibiru, but Planet X, the original Planet X. And it was thought to be responsible for some of the anomalies that had been observed in the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. But it remained unobserved for decades after this was first postulated. But enter Clyde Tombaugh. And the young Tombaugh spent his nights guiding Lowell's 13-inch telescope. I think I've got a picture of that. Let's take a look, because you can see it actually at the observatory there. That's his homemade telescope there that he made. Look at that. Don't you think, back then, back in the 20s, he was only 20 there, but he kind of already looks like a middle-aged man, doesn't he? It's the opposite now. And there is actually you can't really call it a dome, it's an enclosure really, but that's the enclosure where this 13-inch telescope was housed. And there is the telescope, and you go in there and you can still see this right up close and personal. And it even, on the back of it, what that thing is on the back is where they put these great big glass plates in. But he used to have to sit there and guide it, and that means he used to look through that other telescope. You can see there's a long thin telescope on the bottom of that, and he had to look through that all the time and make these minute adjustments to the telescope's pointing, because these exposures on these photographic glass plates, which I think are 20 inches across, something like that, would take hours at a time to expose. And each morning he would process these plates before comparing each with one that he'd taken several nights before, his kind of reference images. So there he is actually entering the observatory with one of these glass plates. And he had to, so he's been there all night, been observing all night, looking through this telescope, guiding this telescope, and then every morning he'd take these enormous glass plates into the processing lab and he'd process them. And then he'd stick them in this machine. I think one of the best pieces of astronomical equipment ever created. And next week we're going to use something, or exactly this same technique, to replicate his discovery. So what he'd do with this machine, it's called the blink comparator. He'd put his reference glass plate in on one side, and he'd put his new image from the previous night on the other side. And he'd blink between the two, and he'd be trying to spot moving objects. Now let's just check, see. Oh, now look at this. So I think it was on the 18th of February 1930, nearly a year after he started his systematic search, he discovered a moving object between the photographic plates he'd taken on, I think it was the 29th, in fact it says it on here but I can't read it, it's too small, 23rd and 29th or the 30th of January 1930. Now, he spotted this moving object. Now let's see if we've got, right, now this is spectacular. This is, I actually took images when I visited that, and this is way back in the 90s, and I stuck a very early digital camera down the eyepiece of the blink comparator, and I took these two images of each plate. Not sure they wanted me to do it, but I did anyway. So these are the original glass plates looking through that piece of equipment, that blink comparator, through the same eyepiece that Clyde Tombaugh used to spot that tiny moving object. Anyway, he went into the office of the observatory director and exclaimed, "Oh, that's right, it was Dr. Slipher. Dr. Slipher, I found your mysterious planet X." Now, is that a great day at the office or not? Be pretty cool, wouldn't it, make a discovery like that? Anyway, the rest, kind of, as they say, is history. And there were loads of great stories. I mean, it was just so exciting. Clyde Tombaugh had discovered the 9th planet of our solar system. News of the discovery, it made headlines around the world. And it was aptly named after, this object was aptly named after the ruler of the cold and dark underworld by an 11-year-old English girl. And Pluto's first two letters also honoured the observatory's long since dead founder, Percival Lowell, which I'm not sure was by design part of the choice, or whether it was just a coincidence. But now, 88 years after its discovery, 21 years after the death of its discoverer Clyde Tombaugh, and a mere 12 years after Pluto's demotion from planet to dwarf planet, we finally explored this tiny world, only a sixth of the mass of Earth's moon, together with its own retinue of tiny moons in unprecedented detail. Yeah, you wouldn't have missed it if you're interested in astronomy. NASA's Pluto Kuiper Belt mission, New Horizons. It was launched back in 2006 using this gravity-assist slingshot maneuver around the gas giant Jupiter in 2007. The spacecraft reached its primary target, Pluto, on July 14, 2015, and it's now speeding further into the darkness to study other objects in the Kuiper Belt. Now, what better way to mark the kind of incredible story of its discovery than to replicate the discovery methods used by Clyde Tombaugh at the Lowell Observatory, but by using Slooh's modern scientific CCD cameras and telescopes. Now, there are 3 steps that we're going to cover over the next couple of weeks. And the first step, obviously, is to acquire your data. We've got to get some images of Pluto. Now, thankfully, it's a little bit easier for us than it was for Clyde Tombaugh. But then we're also, next week, I think we'll cover this bit, after we've all managed to gather together our images for it. We're going to align the images, and then the third step, we're going to blink compare them to try and identify Pluto in our own images, just like Tombaugh did way back then. So anyway, listen, if we need to acquire our own data, we obviously need to find out where it is. Now, Pluto is reaching, is nearing the end of its current apparition, and an apparition is just an object's viewing season, which, depending on the object and its location, is between 8, 9, or maybe even 10 months of the year. There are some objects that are visible all year round, and those are called circumpolar, and those are normally objects that are close to one of the celestial poles. But anyway, the first task at hand is to establish when Pluto is visible from the observatories. So click, 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 click. Here we go. Let's hop over to our Planetarium software. Now, I'm using the SkyX, but the principles are the same for most Planetarium programs here, including the popular and free Stellarium. We'll probably do a live cast 1 week on that, because this really does help to plan out our missions. So I'm just going to call up the sky so I can see it properly on my screen. Now then, sorry, just rearranging a few things on my screen. So here we are. Let's search for Pluto. Now the SkyX, it's currently set up for the Canary Islands Observatory. And if we just type in here, Pluto, in its search box, and in this information down here, it's telling us its rise time, its transit time, and its set time. Now, it's let's have a look actually. Let's set the date to now. So we've got that. So we can see here that from the Canary Islands Observatory, it rises at 5:23 UTC, and it transits, that is, it crosses the meridian, and on the sky you can see it as this orange line. It's an imaginary line that passes through the northmost point on the northern horizon, goes directly up and overhead your location to what's called the zenith, which is the point right in the center of the sky chart. And if you go outside, the zenith is directly over your head. And then that imaginary line, the meridian, carries on going all the way down to the southern horizon. So that's when it transits, and we can see actually already, well, I can because I know when the observatories are open, but that actually occurs after the observatories are closed. Now, let's take another look. We know that the last mission slot at the Canary Islands Observatory is 6:45 UTC, and that is when Pluto is going to be at its highest elevation. Now, if you try and use the Slooh 500, and we're going to set up a mission in a little bit, but if you try and use the Slooh 500 to set up our mission, it won't show Pluto as being visible. That's because we apply what we call a soft horizon limit to so that apprentice members don't schedule objects when they're too low, because when an object's really low, the images that you get back are really poor quality because it's looking through so much atmosphere. Now, each telescope has its own horizon limits, and there's more information about that over in the discussion boards, and we're going to talk, we'll see a little bit of that actually a bit later on. Now, I happen to know that the Canary 3 and 4 telescope horizon limits are lower than the Canary 1 and 2, and checking earlier I saw that Pluto was too low already for the Canary 1 and 2 telescopes to image, but we can use Canary 3 and 4, although frankly until that observatory is back online when the ice is cleared, there's no point in scheduling that. So let's check out Pluto's visibility from the Chile Observatory. Now, to do this, I've got to change the location because visibility depends on where you are in the world. So I'm going up to input, location, my custom locations. You can see here, top 2 in here, Slooh Teide Observatory, and that's Canary Islands, Slooh Chile Observatory. So we flick to the Slooh Chile Observatory. Now, once again, we can see down here, because we've still got Pluto here, its rise time is 0709 UTC. So it's still disappearing into the morning twilight. So we want to schedule our missions in the last couple of mission slots of the night. And this week, that means around 0925. Now, let's actually set that time in the sky, and we'll see, hopefully, exactly where Pluto is going to be. And there it is, you can see it marked. So you can see over here in the left hand side, it's telling us that its altitude is only going to be 26 degrees above the horizon. But for our purpose this week, that's going to be high enough for us to make some reservations. Now, it's still not high enough to appear in the Slooh 500 selection, so we'll have to use a coordinate mission to reserve it. Now, catalogue and coordinate missions give astronomer members the opportunity to reserve a target that's below the soft horizon, because we make the assumption that astronomer members will know that imaging a target so low is going to affect the quality of the resulting images. So if you're an astronomer member, you can set up your own Pluto missions this week using the Chile telescopes or the Canary 3 and 4 when they're back online. But for any apprentice members out there, don't worry, because you can piggyback the missions that I've already set up for us using the Chile telescopes. But we will just take a very quick look now at setting up a coordinate mission, because there was a question this week about setting up a coordinate mission using the sky, because we've got it open at the moment. Now, we're going to set up some missions at the end of the night later this week. So you're not going to see this as we hop over to the reservation page, but I'm going to hop over to the reservation page, see when we've got an available mission slot. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to change the date and time to match that mission slot. And then I'm going to come into here for these two lines, and these are the Epoch 2000 right ascension and declination. Those are the object's coordinates. And actually, if we just do this, I'm going to frame up Pluto. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, because what I've got in the sky, which is really, really useful to plan your missions, is I've got the field of view boxes of the telescopes overlaid. And I'm just going to rotate it so that it's north up, which is the same as all of the Slooh images. Get rid of that little thing. Now, there is Pluto marked, and the first little blue square rectangle that you can see, that's the Chile 1 wide field. So that's what we're going to see in the Chile 1 wide field telescope. But let's just see how much it moves from hour to hour. So you can see there Pluto's moving a very small distance, which would actually be quite difficult to see. And we know that we're really not going to be able to schedule this an hour before the very end of missions anyway. So let's have a look. So let's gather some data over a couple of nights. So let's see how far it moves from the 19th to the 20th to the 21st. So we can see that even if we captured Pluto one night every week this week, it's still going to stay within the same field of view. So in fact, what you could do here to make your task easier, and it's actually what I've done, we'll use the same coordinates every single night, and that's going to help us because our image is going to be pretty well aligned, which will make it far easier to see Pluto. But anyway, so you're not really going to see what I do when I hop back into the sky, because now we're going to hop over to the telescope reservation page. So, talk amongst yourselves. Right, telescopes, scheduled telescopes. I want to do it by telescope. I want the Chile telescopes, Chile 1. Now, I happen to know that the schedule is full for tonight, but you can see here, folks, I've already scheduled a couple of Pluto missions at the end of the night. So if you're an apprentice member, or any member actually, you can piggyback on those by using the auto save to my pictures. But let's take a look, see if there are any slots available tomorrow. No, there aren't, because once again, I have scheduled a couple for you. But let's take a look at Tuesday morning then. Okay, so there's a slot open on Tuesday morning, which is the night, actually it's Wednesday morning, it's the night of the 20th. So I'm just going to hop over to the sky, and I'm going to set the 21st, because it's Wednesday morning, and 9:25, this particular slot here. So you won't see me doing this. And I'm just going to copy the coordinates, right ascension. Then I'm going to hop back to this page, and I'm going to say enter coordinates here. That's the type of mission we want to set up, because as I say, Pluto will not show up as a Slooh 500 object is too low. Now I've copied to my desktop from the sky the right ascension in there, and I do it with decimals because it just makes it easier. I'm copying now the declination coordinates, and I'm going to paste those into there. In fact, I have made a mistake because I did it for the wrong morning, so I'm just going to redo that, which is nice. You can, by the way, edit coordinates even after you've done them if you want. Just going to grab the RA as well, and actually it wouldn't have made much difference because, as we saw, Pluto's still going to be visible within that same field of view. I'm going to put in here Pluto discovery, and then we need to check visibility, and look, we can see here it's giving us a warning. It's saying this object is visible, however it's below the soft horizon, so image quality may be affected. So you know, it's giving us a warning there. So our Pluto images are not going to be pretty, but they're certainly going to be fit for the job. Now I'm going to use the generic image processing option. It doesn't much matter what we use for an object like Pluto, because it really appears as just a star-like object, pinpoint of light. So schedule mission, and I'm going to put in my usual tags, if I can actually spell correctly. And anything that I do for these kind of things, I kind of add in other tags, because that means that I can go through all of my pictures and I can search on particular tags. So any time that I've done this kind of activity, or maybe replicating Galileo Galilei's discovery of the Galilean moons around Jupiter, I pop them in there. So anyway, yep, got that. So there is my mission. Now I'm going to delete that mission a little bit later, so that it leaves more available slots for you. So anyway, oh, by the way, somebody asked the other day in the discussion boards, where can I find my the missions that I've already set up? Now, if this is on the home page, go to your dashboard, and if you go to your dashboard, it shows you all of the missions that you've got scheduled. So there you go. And don't forget, astronomer members, we have given you the ability to cancel a mission until somebody else piggybacks on the back of it. So there you go. There are my missions. Right, how are we doing for time? Oh, blimey, where's the time go, folks? Where's the time go? Right, let's catch up. So listen, we've done the reservations. Let's reconvene this week. So whether you set up your own missions this week or you piggyback on mine or another member's, let's resume the exercise during next Sunday's live cast with our images to hand. So make sure that you've downloaded your images to your machine, and we'll step through how to create an image like this one that actually I prepared earlier. Hold on 1 second. I prepared this one for the 85th anniversary of Clyde Tombaugh's discovery of Pluto. So anyway, don't forget, if you've got any questions about what we've covered just now, post them to the discussion boards and I'll answer them at the end of the live cast or later this week. Now, while you're looking at that, in fact, I think we need to hop back to the clubhouse because we need to get on a bit. I don't know. Somebody's been talking too slowly tonight. Sorry, it's Sunday night. I'm over in the USA at the moment. So it's Sunday evening here. I'm over at Slooh HQ, and Sunday evening, you know, it's kind of quite relaxing. But anyway, listen, I digress yet again, wasting even more time. Now, we've still got loads to get through, which we are obviously not going to get through everything tonight. But as you know, the title of the Sunday night live cast is Practical Astronomy. So there's a great practical exercise that we've done just there, and we're going to continue that next week. And our next topic is also a fine example of those two words, practical astronomy. Yes, It's nearing the time for Slooh's 2018 Members Messier Marathon. So put Saturday the 17th of March in your diaries. And it's a Saturday quite specifically, so that everybody can join in the fun. And each week between now and then, we're going to take a closer look at the Messier Marathon and how you can get involved during this livecast every week. Now, tonight, in the briefest of intros, and point to discussion board topic, actually, where we're going to be adding loads more info and also where you can sign up to participate. So actually, let's take a look at that now. So hop over to the discussion boards, community in the left-hand panel, up to featured threads. I'm not sure if it's a featured thread at the moment, but if not, we'll hunt it down. There you go, Messier Marathon 2018, started by Keith Smith. Thanks, Keith, for starting this off and reminding us about this. So, listen, this is where you've got to keep an eye open this week. So, the 2018 Slooh Messier Marathon. Now, actually, I did just want to show you something in the sky while I've got this available to you, because I am going to tell you what the Messier Marathon is, but I'm going to go up to here. I'm going to change this back actually to the Canary Islands Observatory as our location. I'm going to set the date. Can you see this? I just need to make sure that, oh no, I'm dreadful like that. I'm doing stuff, chuntering away, and you can't see a thing. There you go, I'm back in the sky. I'm setting this up to the right date, and actually we'll have this at the beginning of operations. And I just want to switch a really cool feature on that I spotted in the sky the other day. They actually have a database specifically under optional databases. I hope you can see the pop-up. No, you can't see the pop-up, unfortunately, that's come up on the sky. But what you will see in a minute, I'm about to turn on the Messier objects, and you can see here they are not numbered in their normal way, but they're numbered with a target number. So it's about the start of the sun's still up there. Let's go down. The sun's kind of gone down there. Okay, so what you can see here is part of the planning that we're going to do over the next week. And we're going to go over this in more detail next week, is how we order all of the 110 objects. Actually, let's take a step back, because I haven't really told you what a Messier Marathon is. I think I hinted at it last week, but Messier Marathon uses the Messier catalogue, a catalogue of astronomical objects, which was compiled by a French astronomer, comet hunter he was, in the late 1700s, early 1800s. Charles Messier, and he was fed up with confusing the comets that he was hunting for with these objects. And what he actually ended up doing was, he didn't do, a few of these objects were added later, but he compiled his catalogue, which is now 110 of the best and brightest objects that are visible in the night sky. So it is a great start point for any amateur astronomer or Slooh member if you want to start looking at different types of objects, whether they're galaxies, all the different nebulae type, all the different star cluster types. And you can see here, I'm going to step through the night, that these objects are not evenly spread out. So every one of those little red dots is a Messier object. And as we step through the night, you can see that a lot of them are setting on the right hand side. They're setting to the west. West is to the right, east is to the left on this chart. But you can see here there's a huge cluster around the constellations, between the constellations of Virgo and Leo. Leo, don't forget, Helen Avery's talking about Leo later on. And what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that we cater for these peaks of time so that we're capturing each one of the Messier 110 objects in a single night, but when it's at its best. Now, you saw that at the beginning of the night, some of those objects are right down on the horizon already. Look, some of the Andromeda, and there's a galaxy cluster over there as well. We've got to grab those ones really, really quickly at the beginning of the night before they set. But then we've got these other time constraints. We've got this big cluster here in between Virgo and Leo, and then later on, just before dawn, this massive cluster, which is really overlaying the center of our galaxy, the Milky Way, in the constellation of Sagittarius. Huge number of objects down there, including some of the best nebulae. Now, just before dawn here, some of the other objects just come into view. So we'll be able to get those. But a lot of people will tell you you can't see any of the Messier objects from the southern hemisphere. Well, I say hogwash to that. You can. In fact, I was even reading a book the other day about the Messier Marathon, and they said you can't see any Messier objects in the southern hemisphere. Well, I'm about to change the sky to use the Chile Observatory. So it's now set up for the Chile Observatory. And look at this. Actually, these two giant clusters of Messier objects, that lot over on the right between Virgo and Leo. But more importantly, this crowd near the constellation of Sagittarius actually gets far, far higher from the southern hemisphere than it does from the northern hemisphere. So in fact, Chile is going to be instrumental in our Slooh Messier Marathon this year, because it's going to give us, this is timed now for the end of missions from Chile, it's going to give us actually the best views of some of these beautiful, beautiful objects in and around the constellation of Sagittarius, including the Lagoon Nebula, the Eagle Nebula M16, and bundles more. So actually, that's going to be really important to us. So what are we going to do next week? Well, next week, we're going to go through the detail of how we actually plan out the Messier Marathon. And what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to kind of pin your name against your favorite objects, and you can schedule those. So as a community, we're going to schedule all 110 objects, hopefully using all of the telescopes at both observatories for the entire night. And I'll tell you, participating in one of these, especially if you're new to astronomy, you're going to see probably the widest range of objects. And even within object types, you're going to see the widest array of globular clusters or galaxy types or different types of reflection or emission or planetary nebulae. They are all in a single night. And it's that condensed period of time that turns into actually, I think, one of the best learning opportunities in astronomy. And that's participating in a Messier Marathon. And when we do it, we haven't done one for a few years, have we, folks? When we do it, we're doing it in collaboration with hundreds and hundreds of other members around the world. So anyway, listen, we're running out of time now, so I'm going to hop very quickly on to our last subject, and then we'll take a very quick look and see if we've got any questions that we can deal with. Might have to pick up some of those in the discussion boards later as well. So let's just take a quick hop over, because I said at the beginning of the show, one of the things that I've been trying to squeeze in to this live cast every week is to talk about the observatories more and the telescopes more. But I really want to go through each telescope when all of them are online, which means when the Canary Islands telescopes are online, as well as the Chile Observatory. But what I wanted to point you to now, and this is something a few members have really enjoyed having this week, under featured threads in the discussion boards, we're going to leave this here for quite some time, possibly permanently. You can see a post by me saying observatory information and telescope specifications. Now, next week, we're going to take a closer look at each one of these, but this is basically a single post, and it's got all of the links that you need to go directly to let's say the half-meter telescope in the Canary Islands, that observatory, that telescope, and it's got all of the information that you want about that particular telescope, plus some images of it as well. So I'm going to go through that in slightly kind of more detail when the telescopes are online. But actually, have we got time to just take you through one thing? Let's have a look here. I haven't got much time. Let's just take a quick look here. I'm just going to take you through a few pics that you probably have not seen before. So this is the Canary 1 telescope, and we're going to talk about the type of telescope it is next week, if it's clear, and also the other equipment that's attached to the back of it, the CCD camera, the temperature control focuser, the filter wheels, all manner of other stuff like that. I've got some other photos in here. We've got the Canary 2 telescope. So it's a similar telescope, but a slightly smaller version of it. That one's 17 inches, its primary mirror, rather than 20 inches, which is the half-meter telescope. And hop on, that's another one of the Canary 2 wide-field telescope. Now, this is an image, and I'm going to go through the detail of what really makes all of these different and what makes them good for one object or another. But this is the Canary 3 telescope. Now, you can see on the back of this telescope where there's normally a slot to put an eyepiece or a camera, there is none. The camera on this actually goes on the front because it's not really a telescope. It's a piece of equipment called an astrograph, and it is purely for using with a camera. You can't use an eyepiece on this at all, because if you put an eyepiece on the front of the telescope, your head would be in the way of the light from that distant object that you were trying to observe. So you'd be obscuring your own view. This is the telescope, the kind of telescope which is called a Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. And this is the type of telescope that the Canary 4 telescope uses, and also the Chile 1 ultra wide field. And then this is the solar telescope. Hopefully this will be back online this week. If you are a Slooh member and you haven't seen the Canary Islands open because of this ice storm that we've had over the last couple of weeks, you are in for a treat when you see the live video views from the Slooh solar telescope. Oh, that's beautiful. I'm really hoping we can reopen next week. So I'll talk more about the solar telescope next week. There it is again, another shot. Pretty complicated piece of equipment, and it's actually more complicated than it actually looks there in that image. There's the Chile setup, although that's with the old Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. It's now got a new white one on there, like the one we just saw. But on the top of that telescope, you can also see there's a little refractor, and that's kind of the kind of telescope that you'd probably think about. If somebody said, that's a telescope, that's the kind that you think about. Bit of glass on the front, eyepiece at the back, and it looks like a tube. And that's a refractor telescope, and that's our ultra-wide field Chile telescope. It's also the same kind of telescope used for the Canary 2 ultra-wide field. But we'll go through all of that next week, and we'll take a look at the observatories in more detail as well. Gosh, I wish it looked like that now, not covered in the snow and ice that we've got at the moment. Nice little panorama there. Oh, and that was one that I took the other day. That was a snowy scene from the new panorama camera that we've got. And then that mega image I did, that actually goes virtually 360 degrees around the horizon. I was standing on top of one of the solar telescopes at the Canary Islands Observatory, and then you can see Pico del Teide, the volcano, over on the right hand side of that image. And over to the left you can see one of the large telescopes that is actually used for tracking space junk. It's a European Space Agency telescope called the OGS, the Optical Ground Station. And sometimes in our all-sky camera, we'll see the green lasers that are shooting out of that, either over to the other islands to test some equipment or actually up to an object. And there's the Chile dome, which actually I'll try and find you a photo of that next week that has a person in the same image, because that doesn't look very big, that dome, but actually you can park about 4 cars inside it. It is massive. Anyway, so listen, I just want to hop back to here because there was one question, and I'll tell you what I'll do. I will pick up on questions in the discussion boards and answer those during the week, and let's kind of try and make next week purely about, we'll do a tiny bit on the Messier Marathon, we'll do a tiny bit on recreating the Clyde Tombaugh discovery of Pluto. We'll keep those really short, and let's try and keep it a big Q&A. So pile your questions into the discussion boards for me, and try and make most of the questions about the observatories, about the telescopes. And that means we'll focus next week on the telescopes. And I know I've already got one question in from Michael T, who asked about creating mosaics. We'll maybe deal with that in a separate show, that one, Michael, when we start the image processing course. Or if I have time in one of these live casts on a Sunday, I might hop through that. But there was another question as well, and I think that was from Michael as well, that talked about the different processing options and how they affect the data that you get. Well, you can see on this post that I've given about the observatory information and telescope specifications page, there's a link for each observatory for the processing options guide. And what this tells you is the type of images that are created for each telescope. So this top one is the Canary Islands half-meter telescope, and it's the generic processing option. So if you're an astronomer member and you choose the generic option, it's going to take 3 60-second exposures through the luminance filter, 1 60-second exposure through the red, 1 60-second through the green, 1 60-second through the blue. But you can see on some of the other telescopes, they use slightly different exposure times. But we'll also talk about how these processing options affect the real-time processed PNG images that you get to collect in your My Images. Now, I'm going to be cut off unless I bring this to an end. Sorry, I will include less and complete more in our live cast on a Sunday evening. My problem is, you see, one, I digress, but secondly, I also get, I get excited about some of these things that we're looking at. So I'm just checking in on the Chile Wide Field Telescope. Now, I am going to leave you here because I'm going to be opening up the Canary Islands 1 telescope. I've got to do this manually, and I've got to be very careful how I do it because we've still got ice around the domes. But I'm going to be opening that up so that Helen Avery can get some brilliant views, not only from the Chile telescope, but also from Canary 1 for some of these objects that she's going to be talking about tonight in the constellation of Leo. So in just under half an hour's time, come back here, 9 p.m. Eastern time, and join Helen, because tonight she's going to be taking us on this journey back more than 5,000 years to when the great sphinxes were built in Egypt. And already Helen's description of her show has taught me something, because I only thought there was a single sphinx. But Helen's going to tell us about a number of them, and she's also going to be telling us how they're connected to the zodiacal constellation Leo, and why the lion was so important to ancient Egyptians. And of course, it's not just me and Helen on a Sunday evening. Down here we can scroll down to live cast, and we can see here that Dr. Paige Godfrey has got her show on Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. And what's she doing in her intro to astronomy course? She's looking at these weird signals that come in from outer space. The one coming from Tabby Star that you may have seen in the news. So anyway, lots to look forward to here. Keep an eye, as I say, on the discussion boards this week, because I'll be giving loads more updates on the Canary Islands Observatory and the ice that we've got here. Sorry, David H, I see you posed a question there. I'll either stack some of these questions up to answer next week, or we'll do a special Q&A where we just do Q&A, nothing pre-planned. Or if they're more urgent than that, I'll actually answer them in the discussion boards. But that is it for me for this evening. Do not go anywhere though, because 25 minutes time, Helen Avery with her constellation stories, taking us back in time 5,000 years to the great sphinxes of Egypt.
I'm Paul Cox. This has been Practical Astronomy on Sunday evening. Bye for now. See you next week. Bye all.